Welcome to the Wisdom of the Body Summit, an online event to align with your body's intelligence for healing, optimal living, and spiritual awakening. Brought to you by Sounds True. Throughout this summit, 32 experts will share practical tools and breakthrough insights that have emerged from the convergence of science and time-honored perspectives from the world's spiritual traditions. As we learn to recognize and honor the incredible wealth of knowledge that lies within our bodies, we can begin to listen and attend to ourselves more fully, opening a doorway to greater health and well-being. Hi, everybody. Today, it's my pleasure to introduce best-selling author of The Biology of Belief, Spontaneous Evolution, and The Honeymoon Effect, Dr. Bruce Lipton. As a stem cell biologist and expert in the field of epigenetics and an internationally recognized leader in bridging science and spirit, I am excited to invite Bruce to share his presentation with us today. It's titled The Human Mind, the Voice of the Creator. Welcome, Bruce.
Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity to talk to our fabulous community of people out there, because we must recognize right away that our community of people watching and listening to this program represent what we refer to as cultural creatives. These are the people that are looking for answers outside of the conventional box, because the conventional box isn't really working very well at this moment. And so I really appreciate our audience, because together I think we have some wonderful topics to help empower them on this path. New biology, new science, and just very simply, knowledge is power. And what we're going to talk about today is knowledge of self, which then by definition means self-empowerment. And I really look forward to this, because there's a general belief that we are sort of like victims in a world going strange, when it really turns out we are actually creating this. And so hence the title of the program is, you are actually creating your life experience. And as a creator, the quality of your life is not in others' hands, but in our own. But we didn't understand that. We didn't have the knowledge. And again, knowledge is power, but let's emphasize, a lack of knowledge is a lack of power. And we have been deprived of some knowledge that is so important, and it is the leading edge frontier science and biology and physics. And so the public needs this information right now. And I'm so happy to be here with you, Christy, so we can give them a great story.
I'm excited to get that great story. I'm taking notes right now.
Well,
yes.
let's start off with, I'm going to start off with something that I tell people, and then they listen to it, and then sometimes it's just like, oh, that was nice, like it was a fact, and they forget about it. And I go, no, this is so important that I want to emphasize it before we even start. And that is this. There are many different sciences on our planet. We can talk about biology and chemistry or psychology and all these things. But there's one science that is the most valid, truthful, and most tested of all the sciences, and that's quantum physics. Now, quantum physics is like, if you start talking about mathematics and equations, everybody goes, oh, I have no idea what the heck they're talking about. So I'm going to just simplify and say this. The first principle in quantum physics is that consciousness is creating our life experience. I go, that's the first principle of the most valid science. So as we go into our discussion today and start talking about consciousness, it's not like, oh, that's nice, that's some consciousness over here. I go, no. Consciousness is creating our life experience. And while I'm going to talk about a biological aspect of that, I just need to underscore the physics of this before we go deeper, because it is primal. Physics is the primal science. It means mechanism. So you can say Newtonian physics, Newtonian mechanics, quantum physics, quantum mechanics, mechanism. So let's dive into the mechanisms of biology. And I'm going to start off with the fact that about 52 years ago, I was working in a laboratory learning and cloning stem cells. Now, first of all, let's start with a definition. What the heck are stem cells? And the issue is this. When we look in the mirror and see ourselves, and what we start to recognize is that we see ourselves as a single entity. Well, it turns out that that's not true at all. That the simple truth is simply this, is that we are a community of 50 trillion cells. So if you could see with a microscope what's going on in your body, you would find that there were 50 trillion cells in the system, okay? And the beautiful part about this is that we are a community of cells. And the significance is this. Every day, we lose hundreds of billions of cells die every day. Red blood cells are dying. Skin cells are sloughing off all the time. The digestive tract, the entire lining is replaced every 3 days. That's a trillion cells. So now here comes a question. If you're alive, how can you stay alive if you lose hundreds of billions of cells every day? And the answer is simply this. Because in our body, there is the equivalent of embryonic cells. And the name for these cells, before you were born, they were called embryonic cells. After you're born, legally, it's like, well, they're not embryonic cells anymore. Now they're in your body and you're not an embryo. We changed the name to stem cells. So first thing is this. What is a stem cell? It's an embryonic cell, and its function is to replace any of the cells that die in our system so they keep us alive and keep us going. If anybody's questioning, do they have stem cells? The question is very easily answered. If you're alive right now, yeah, you have stem cells, because otherwise you wouldn't be. So I'm working with these stem cells, which are these embryonic cells. And so like in the first slide, what I can show you is here's a tissue culture dish, okay? And I say, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to put these embryonic or multi-potential, meaning an embryonic cell can become any kind of cell. I'm going to put one cell in the petri dish. So as you can see now, as I add one cell to the dish, what happens is the cells divide every 10 or 12 hours. So first there's one cell, then it doubles two, and then it doubles four, doubling and doubling and doubling. And after a week, I have 30,000 cells in the petri dish. The most important aspect of this study so far is this. All 30,000 cells are genetically identical cells because they came from the same parent. So I have 30,000 genetically identical cells, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to split the cells up into 3 different petri dishes, and I'm going to change the combination of the culture medium for each dish. Now let's back off and say culture medium. I go, yes, culture medium is the environment in which cells grow. Cells are like fish. They live in a fluid environment, like an aquarium. That's why if you cut yourself open, fluids leak out because cells live in a fluid environment. In a laboratory, I create that fluid environment. It's called culture medium. That's the environment cells live in. I say, well, what's culture medium besides that fluid? I go, it's the laboratory version, the equivalent of blood. So if I want to grow human cells, I look at what human blood is made out of and then use that chemistry to make culture medium. So now I'm making human culture medium in the lab, but I can change some of the combinations being the guy who's creating that culture medium. So I create 3 different versions of culture medium. And what's different? I say the chemistry is slightly different. Basically the same, but some slight difference in chemistry. So I got 3 different versions, and I'm going to feed the cells out. Well, the culture medium is the environment. So now I'm going to create 3 different environments, A, B, and C. And I'm going to have in each of the 3 dishes where there are genetically identical cells in all the dishes. The only thing that's going to be different is the combination of the culture medium ingredients. Okay? So if we look now at the slide and I say, I take some of those cells out and put it into a petri dish, and let's call it environment A because I'm using culture medium version A. And I say, when I put that that culture medium in the dish, my embryonic stem cells form muscle. Now, I go to dish number 2, where I have environment B, which is, again, a different chemistry. for the culture medium. And in that chemistry, the cells form bone. And then in a third Petri dish, environment C, again with a different culture medium combination, the cells form fat cells. Well, this is an amazing thing for me as a research scientist at the moment, because at the moment, I'm teaching students the conventional belief that genes control the character of our lives, okay? And as I'm teaching that in the classroom, I go back in the lab, and what do I find? That genetically identical cells in different environments have different fate. And I said, well, wait a minute. They all had the same genes. So it wasn't that, oh, the cells in dish A had different genes. I go, no, they all had the same genes, yet they all had different fates. And so you have to stand back and ask the question, well, what is controlling the fate of these cells? And the answer is profoundly simple and profound in its understanding. I say, it was the environment in which the cells live that control the genetics of the cell. The genes in the cell didn't say, oh, I'm going to be muscle or I'm going to be bone on their own. They did it because of the environment. Well, this clashes completely with the lecture that I'm providing to students that genes control life. And let me just acknowledge that belief system about genes controlling the biology, the behavior, the emotions, and all that. Generally, the public, that's the belief system that they hold. Okay? And I go, but what does the tissue culture study say? I said, no, the tissue culture said the genes didn't make any decision on that. It was the environment. So basically what I saw back in that day was something that I didn't have a name for it because it wasn't observed by really any other people. I was in a unique position to work with stem cells in a world where there's only a handful of us in the entire world back in 50 years ago that even knew what a stem cell was. So I was in the right place at the right time with the right study. And what did I show? I showed the foundation of what is now a new science. And as you can see on the screen here, this new science is called epigenetics. And epigenetics is the new version of the science that I saw 52 years ago. So now we have a name for it. I go, so what does the name mean? And I say, well, this is important for the public to understand. When I say this character is under genetic control, what I'm referring to is that genes control the character. But in our new science, I say, oh, this character is under epigenetic control. Well, it sounds almost the same, but I go, it's a revolution because epi means above. I say, what's the name of skin? I say, in the Latin version, it's called epidermis. I say, what does that mean? It's the layer above the dermis, the skin above. So now I say, what is epigenetic control? And here's the whole profound, definition. It represents control above epi, the control above the genes. I go, the control's not in the genes? The whole story that genes control our life? Well, as we can see in the next slide, the definition here is very, very simple and very clear. It's a fact. It's a fact, and this is the fact. Genes do not control biology. And what I mean by that is genes are not, and I'll use the word self-actualizing. And that means genes do not make decisions. And yet you talk to people and they go, oh, well, cancer gene turned on and this gene did this and this gene caused that. And I go, no, fact of life. A gene is a blueprint to make a protein, which is a complex molecule. And that's exactly what it is. You say, so what does that mean? I say, a gene is a blueprint. I say, listen, let's go into an architect's office and she's working on a blueprint. And you lean over her shoulder and you say, excuse me, is your blueprint on or off? And she would look at you like, what, are you crazy? It's a blueprint. There's no on and off. Precisely. Genes do not make decisions. Genes do not turn themselves on and turn themselves off. As the study revealed with the cells in the tissue culture dish, the control of the genes is coming from the environment. And why is that important? Well, take the old belief, genes control life. And I say, as far as you know, did you pick the genes you came with? You go, no. And I say, if you don't like the genes, can you just change them? And I go, no. And what we're told is genes turn on and off, so they're doing their own thing. And then I say, well, put that together. And I say, what does it make you? And I said, it makes you a victim of heredity. Oh my God, there's cancer genes running in the family, and I'm going to get the cancer gene, then I'm going to get the cancer, or cardiovascular disease is coming in, or Alzheimer, and everybody is looking at their genes as like a blueprint of their life. I go, well, they are blueprints, but as blueprints are not able to turn themselves on and off, then the whole idea that genes were making decisions for you is a completely false idea. Genes, yes, and genes are controlling us. Christy, do you want to offer something?
Yeah, I just want to just step in here for a second, because a lot of times we hear that, oh, we're predisposed because our parents and grandparents and everybody up and down the line had some version or some expression of this particular disease. What do you say to that, to the idea that we are predisposed or maybe more genetically inclined toward a certain disease or chronic condition?
Okay, well, look, in my next slide, I really want to compare two words that need to be defined. One is causation, one is correlation. They're very different meanings, and yet in the media, they mix the two together randomly. Genes cause this. I go, no, genes are correlated with that. And you go, what's the difference? I say, well, what's the definition of causation? The causation definition is the act or agency which produces an effect. X causes or acts and produces Y. And I said, that's what caused it. I said, what about correlation? I go, oh, that's a relationship existing between phenomena or things. So I say, okay, here's what you call a cancer gene. First question, does the gene cause cancer? And the answer is nope. There is not one gene that causes cancer. Okay, I say genes are correlated with cancer. What does that mean? I say the genes need to be engaged, but the engagement of the genes is not by the genes, it's by the environment in which the cells live that will determine what genes are going to be. So I say a cancer gene, let's say the breast cancer gene, people say, well, that causes cancer, and Angelina Jolie has a double mastectomy because she wants to avoid the problem of this gene that her mother died from, her grandmother died from. She didn't want to die. So she said, if I remove my breasts, and what was the point? And the point was this, the total belief that the gene caused cancer and that if she possesses the cells with the stupid gene, then she was going to get the cancer. And then I back off and I say, 50% of the women with BRCA1 and 2 genes never get the cancer. And that's an important point. We have to stop at that point. I say, what does that mean? I say, possession of the gene itself did not cause the cancer. It was an environment that encouraged the expression of the gene. So the gene is correlated with cancer, but the gene does not cause cancer. I say, well, why is this relevant? If the gene caused cancer, then you're a victim of having a cancer gene. And Angelina Jolie's movement, well, that would make sense. But then if we go back and say having the gene didn't cause the cancer, it was the lifestyle. And you go, lifestyle? So I'll refer to a study that was real interesting. They looked at the fate of children adopted into families where cancer is running in the family. And what did they find? They found that the adopted child would get the same family cancer with the same probability as any of the natural siblings. Point? The adopted child has completely different genetics. And what was the point? Well, the cancer didn't come from the genes. It came from the environment and the programming of that child. And so it turns out, let's stop blaming the genes and start recognizing we are the architects of what's going on with those genes. This is important for a simple reason, not to blame ourselves for what's going on, but it gives us the opportunity to say, wait, I am not a victim? I go, no, you can understand the nature of how it works, then you can understand how to control it. So let's just step back on this correlation and causation thing. Let me give a very important fact. There are only about a half a dozen genes that are responsible for any major disease. Okay, I'll tell you which. There are 6 diseases, okay, that are connected to one gene. And why am I saying that? And the answer is simply this: how much do genes contribute to health issues on the planet? Less than 1% of illness is connected to genes. And all of a sudden it's like, what? Everybody's talking about every gene and every disease being connected. I go, less than 1%. I said, all of a sudden, if that's a fact, which it is, then it becomes important to say, well, then what's responsible for the disease if it isn't the genes? And I go, the environment. Okay, so let me just list the genes. These are the genes that cause a single disease. And here's a list of them. Single gene diseases: cystic fibrosis, hemophilia, Huntington's disease, Tay-Sachs, Marfan syndrome, a connective tissue disease, and hemochromatosis, which is an iron metabolism disease. I say, what's interesting? Those are the diseases that only takes one gene to cause that disease, okay? Everything else takes multiple genes. So I said, well, how many genes does it take to make cancer? I say, to get a cancer off the ground takes a minimum of 14 to 15 genes. I go, why is that, Rob? I said, what's the probability that accidentally 14 or 15 of your genes mutated at the same time to create cancer? And the fact is, that wouldn't happen that way. So there's another process, and this process is understanding how life works. So to simplify that, my next slide shows a cell. And a cell is made out of some very large macromolecules. I'll give you the example: sugars, fats, nucleic acids like DNA and RNA, and proteins. And I go, these are the major building blocks of a cell. And the primary building block of the cell are proteins. And there are over 100,000 different proteins. These are very complex molecules that have each protein has a unique shape. And each protein has a unique function. So when you look at how is a cell built, the building materials, the primary ones, are called proteins. Interesting, the word protein is defined as primary element. Well, that is. So proteins are the primary element of life. They give us our structure. But there's something more to it. So in this coming slide right here, what you can see are 3 different versions of proteins. And I say each protein has a very unique shape and provides for our physical structure. Now comes the most important understanding of all. Where does life come from? I said, well, it comes from proteins. And then you go, oh, wait, the proteins give us our structure. I go, yes, but they also give us our function. You say, well, how does that work? I say, proteins provide the structure. And then here comes the important fact. Proteins can change their structure. It's also called conformation in biology. They can go from shape A to shape B. They move as they change shape. I say, yeah, but what causes that? And I go, environmental signals are like a key that complement proteins. And when the environmental signal shows up, it's like a key in the ignition that causes the protein to change shape. I say, yeah, so environment causes the protein to change shape, and shape changes our movement, which is called life. Okay, and it's real interesting because how important is the environmental signal that comes to this? When a person dies, guess what? It's called a cadaver. I go, and they still have their structure. They have all the proteins. That's how you can see them. The proteins gave the structure, but the person is not alive. I said, well, then what happened? What was missing? I say, it's environmental signal, because the proteins are like a statue, but environmental signals engage them to move. And that's when all of a sudden animation, movement, life comes from. So when we look at our slide and I say, here's environmental signals, and that there's a unique signal for each protein to engage it, and then we can illustrate it this way. And then the molecular model on the screen, the movements of these proteins, these are actual reconstructions of actual protein molecules moving as studied in a laboratory. And what you can see is every protein has a unique movement. And I say, so what? And I say, well, consider an assembly line where workers line up and each one does one little task, and then you get a product at the end. I go, that's how life is created. The proteins are like the assembly line, and when they move, they start to engage and create a product. They create us, actually. So that's where it comes from. So I say, what's the conclusion? This is the profound conclusion. And it goes like this. In this slide, we see that protein is the key word because that's what the body is made out of. It's made out of protein. And I say, yeah, but what did we just mention? I say, well, the protein can respond to an environmental signal. So I put signal into the picture. And then I say, well, what happens when the signal, like the key, plugs into the protein like the lock? I say, when the signal binds to the protein, as we can see now, it creates behavior. So all of a sudden I go, behavior is life. Behavior is movement. And all of a sudden I say, so what's the difference between the cadaver and a live person? I say, both have proteins, but the cadaver is missing the signal control. And when the signals stop, the proteins stop. And when the proteins stop, no more movement. And when there's no more movement, then by definition, no more life at that moment. Now comes an interesting question. So what are the signals that control life? And I go, let's go back to the study where in the next slide, the signal is what? I say the next slide shows a tissue culture dish. And I say I feed a culture medium. And I say, what is culture medium? I say, well, it's the equivalent of blood. I say, so what does the culture medium in the Petri dish do? I say, just the same as the blood in the body. It provides nutrition. And a little sidebar right here about the nutrition aspect. When we eat food to build or create or manifest the blood and put the nutrition into the blood. Let me just emphasize this. In the laboratory, when I'm creating culture medium, which directly impacts the cells in the culture dish, okay, I do not buy my ingredients at Kmart. I get the best ingredients and the possible I could ever get for a reason. If I compromise the nutritional component of my culture medium and feed the cells a compromised medium, in minutes I can observe in the microscope the cells start to get sick. And all of a sudden it says, what does it emphasize? Well, number one, it says, well, if you're going to make culture medium, well, then you use the best ingredients impossible. And I say, well, since culture medium carries nutrition and we create it, this is a little sidebar that I emphasize that says, then we should be very cautious and careful of the food that we put in our body because we're using that food to create culture medium. And the toxicity of a lot of our industrial farm food is adding elements to the culture medium that toxifies the cells. And all of a sudden you can see, a bad diet could kill you at this point because it's not providing what you need. So let me make this point so that we can really carry on the conversation, Christy. It goes like something like this. It goes, the cells in the culture dish are responding to the environment. That's the fact of the research. Then I say, well, how does that affect me as a human? I go, well, wait, this is the exciting part. I mentioned a human is made out of 50 trillion cells. So the important insight is this. A body is a skin-covered Petri dish with 50 trillion cells inside. And I said, oh, and it has the original culture medium, blood. And I say, does it make a difference to the fate of the cell if it's in a plastic dish or in a skin dish? I go, nope. The fate of the cell is not controlled by if it's in plastic dish or skin dish. It's controlled by the environment, which in the plastic dish is culture medium, my version of blood. And in your body, your skin-covered Petri dish, it's your own version of culture medium, your own blood. So we talked about, the blood in your body is providing nutrition and nourishment for your cells, but there's another aspect to it too. And so when we look at the slide and go to look at it and say, the blood has cellular signals. What? I go, in addition to nutrition, the blood is carrying the hormones that regulate, that control the genetics and behavior of the cells, growth factors, immune chemistry. All of this is added to the nutrition. So blood isn't just nutrition. Blood is nutrition plus information in the form of molecules such as hormones or emotional chemicals. So you're feeding the cells not just nourishment, but you're feeding them information. And these are the cellular signals that end up in the blood. Now we have to step back and say, okay, in the laboratory, I'm creating the culture medium. I can mix it up, do anything I want, create the versions that I have. I say, what about in your body? You have culture medium blood. And I go, well, who's the chemist? Who controls the chemistry of your blood? I say, why is that the most important thing? I said, because as the experiment revealed, the chemistry of the blood is controlling the genetics. So all of a sudden I say, well, you have a skin-covered Petri dish and you have blood culture medium. And then I say, well, who's the chemist? And I go, the brain is the chemist. So in the next slide, what we see is this. The environment has signals. There's signals coming from the outside, light, sound, smell, taste, touch. And you also have signals from the inside, hormones, growth factors, emotional chemicals, okay? I say, okay, so these are signals. I said, but who reads these signals? And then all of a sudden, as I advance the slide, what I can see is this. The brain is perception. That reads the signals from the environment. Then what does it do? It translates the environmental signals into biology by converting it into complementary chemistry. So the point is very simply this. The blood and the nervous system take the information from the brain, which is reading the environment, and then send signals, whether they're hormones, growth factors, or nerve activity, send signals to the cells. And then I say, then what? I say, well, this is then where we are in the Petri dish. The environment is controlling behavior and genetic activity. So all of a sudden I go, wow, the system is really a beautiful system. How does it work? Environmental signals are perceived by the brain. The brain interprets those signals by releasing complementary chemistry via the blood and the nervous system. The signals from blood and nervous system then are interacting with the cell and controlling behavior and genetics. So the conclusion is very important. Environment controls behavior and genes. Well, that was the observed response in the Petri dish studies 52 years ago, environment. But as I started to go into this a little bit deeper, I started to recognize as we go up the evolutionary scale, the brain starts to increase a character called consciousness. And I say, well, before consciousness, everything was called subconscious. It was behavior controlled by the biology without thinking about it. The heart knows how to beat, and the nervous system will see what's going on in the world and adjust the beating. You don't have to think about that. The temperature of your body is controlled by what? Environmental signals. If it's cold out, the brain picks up the signal, releases chemistry to complement that signal that does what? Causes the body to heat up. If you go out and it's warm out, the nervous system perceives the temperature. What's it going to do? Release chemistry to do what? Cool you down. So let's say body temperature is not controlled by consciousness in any sense. It's controlled by the response to the environment directly, subconscious. But as we get higher and higher in evolution, we introduce consciousness, which is associated with what's called the prefrontal cortex of the brain, where all of a sudden we have a creative control over the automatic system. So in the next slide, we start off with the same picture. Yes, environment, brain picks it up as perception, nervous system, blood transmitted to the cells. But then I say, wait, we add something new to this picture. And I say, what's that? And I say, mind. And I say, mind is an interpretation of the world. The perception just reads hot, cold, does that change, okay? But mind makes a picture. And then the brain translates that picture. And I say, well, why is it relevant? I said, two people standing in the exact same environment, looking at the world at exactly the same time, can have totally different responses to what they see based on their mind, their interpretation. One looks out and goes, wow, this is the most beautiful environment. I'm feeling so happy and healthy. And the other one's looking around, I'm afraid in this environment. And all of a sudden I say, oh, well, that's different chemistry. And all of a sudden I say, so what's the meaning of this? I say, the environment sends signals, but we acquire an understanding of the meaning of signals. And that is called the mind. There's an interpretation. And two people can respond to the same signals, but with different minds have totally different responses to it because it's the interpretation. So in my image, then the mind is receiving an interpretation. And then what the mind does is tell the brain what the interpretation is. And the brain then makes complementary signals to match not the world, but the interpretation of the world. So the mind gets between the world and the cells, and the mind translates the world's vision into chemistry that adjusts the cells to adapt to the environment. So now I say, well, what's the conclusion? I say, our interpretation of the world is our perception of the world. And I go, why is that relevant? And I say, well, two people could be in the same world and have totally different perceptions. I say, so then what's the connection of the perception? I say, it's the belief of each of the two individuals. They each have different beliefs. That means they each have different perceptions. And having different perceptions in the same environment, since the perception is the aspect that controls the brain, then each of them could have two different responses to the exact same environmental signals because the perception can distort the signal. Fine. Now I say, well, how does it work? Well, belief, because why do I call it belief? And I say, think about it this way, just quick question. Are all of our perceptions about the world true? Do every perception I hold about the world actually true? And I go, no, but at the moment I might believe it. The word belief. I might believe it. I go, belief is the interpretation of our perceptions. Two people have different beliefs and therefore they have different perceptions of the world. So now I come back and I say, okay, so how does it work? And so in this cartoon, which I'm going to show a cartoon of the brain right here, what's interesting is the brain is the chemist. The flask that brain is holding is mixing up the ingredients called culture medium, which we call blood. And then the brain uses that culture medium to feed the 50 trillion cells in the culture dish. So I say, well, how does it work? And I say, here's an example of it. You and I, Chrissy, are just sitting here right now, and I say, we both close our eyes. And when we open our eyes, we see someone we love. And I go, love is an interpretation. Love is a mind interpretation. I say, yeah, but if the mind has this interpretation and controls the chemistry, what chemistry is correlated with love? And I go, when we are experiencing love in our mind, the body's chemistry changes. The brain releases beautiful chemistry, dopamine, pleasure. That's why we love love, because it gives us pleasure. The chemistry signals going to the cell are like dopamine, great life. It also releases oxytocin. That's the bonding chemical that says, where are you getting that love from? Because you want more of that. And so oxytocin connects you to the source of that love and bonds you. Vasopressin, an interesting molecule, makes us more attractive to our partner to keep that love coming. And interestingly enough, growth hormone is released when you have a picture in your mind of love. And growth hormone, the word, it says what it is. It enhances your growth and vitality. So I say, so if I make culture medium with the same chemistry that comes from a brain perceiving love and put those elements into the culture medium, I will enhance the growth of those cells. And I say, need I say any more than look at people in love? They glow, they're healthy, they're vital. I go, that's not an accident or coincidence. That's a consequence of the chemistry of love feeding the behavior and the genetics of the cells with information to grow and be happy. Now I go back to the same image, but this time instead of love, when we open our eyes, we see something that scares us, okay? We're in fear. I say, oh, the mind in fear sends a different message to the brain, which releases chemistry to deal with fear. I go, well, what chemistry is that? I go, well, stress hormones, for example, cortisol, norepinephrine, the stress hormones that get us ready for fight or flight, as well as chemistry that controls our immune system, such as histamine, or what are called hormones in the immune system, cytokines. I go, oh, wait a minute, let's stop at this point. And I'm going to say, what? We looked at the chemistry when the mind was in love and released one set of chemicals. But the moment the mind is in fear, we release a different set of chemicals. And I say, so? I go, the chemicals that are released by the brain are controlling the behavior and the genetics. So as you see the world, you adjust your biology to match your interpretation of that world. And I go, well, that's where the signals come from. Okay. So now if I go to the next slide, and basically what the next slide is it's about the mind. I say, what is the function of the mind? And this is the cool part. The function of the mind is to create coherence between your beliefs and your reality. And I say, why is that relevant? I say, well, your beliefs are controlling your mind, which are then controlling your behavior and genetics. And if you believe you are a victim, then guess what? You are now a victim, because the chemistry of that will shut down your ability to control your cells. But if you believe you're a master, there's different chemistry that comes from that and allows you to control the system. And basically I said, so are you a victim or master? I go, that's your belief. And then I say, but what does the nervous system do? It takes that belief and turns it into reality. I go, why would it do that? And I said, well, look at it the other way. What would your life be like if you had a whole bunch of beliefs and every moment of your life, nothing matched your beliefs? You'd be like, what's going on? The world's crazy. I go, no, your beliefs match the world that you see. And I go, so your beliefs are a filter that sees the world. And I go, absolutely. And your beliefs are translated into chemistry that controls your cells. I go, absolutely. And therefore, your belief is being translated by the nervous system into chemistry, which in turn controls the biology and activity of your system. You change your belief, you change your chemistry. You change your chemistry, you change your genetic activity. And all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, I'm the one that's controlling my genes. I go, yes, this is the whole thing. It comes down to it. It's how you see the world. And I go, well, think about it this way. If you're an infant in a family where cancer is running in the family, and then you get the programming from the health professional. Well, listen, cancer is running in your family, and you have the cancer gene. I say, what is that perception that person is now holding? They have a perception of a ticking time bomb, that inside their body there's some gene that at any moment is going to be expected to create cancer. And I go, well, what do you know? If that's your perception and your vision is to create cancer, then the chemistry that your brain will release will do what? Make coherence between that belief and the reality that you're experiencing. And all of a sudden I say, yeah, then the blood is going to release chemistry to do what? Create cancer. And that's where I say, well, that's where the cause comes from. The genes will facilitate it if you have that cause. And that's why 50% of the women with these BRCA genes never get the cancer. Why? Because their environment, their perceptions, their beliefs are not molded in that victim. I'm a victim of my genes, and therefore their life doesn't express this. But if they have a picture of cancer in their head, then the brain will translate that picture, positive or negative, into chemistry that matches the picture. So I say, well, this is new stuff. And I go, no, look, in the next slide, what's interesting is the Buddha, 2,500 years ago, exclaimed that what we think, we become. And today, with the nature of epigenetics and the science of how our thoughts are translated into chemistry, which then create the behavior and expression of our cells, well, this is the validity of the Buddha's statement. Our thinking is creating our reality. And then all of a sudden, I have to step back, little sidebar. I go, opening gambit to this presentation. quantum physics is the most valid science on this planet. I go, what does quantum physics say? Consciousness is creating your life experience. And now I'm going, oh, yes. And epigenetics is the process of doing that. And you go, well, Bruce, you're talking about all this new agey idea. I go, well, listen, when I first started talking about this, most of my colleagues ran away from me like, man, Lipton's crazy because of his belief. Because when I came up with this, that was in the heart of the world of genetic control. And I'm the only guy going, it's not the genes. And so being the only one in the crowd, they didn't really care. And in fact, I even left the system because I realized, if you're a scientist, then how come you ignore that I can do this experiment every day and I can predict the answer, because prediction is the hallmark of science. And I say, the changes I'm talking about are not accidents. I can tell you 3 days before they show up. And all of a sudden, it's like prediction. But the world was in the genes at the time. And then I had the wonderful opportunity to go to Stanford and bring that idea into the realm of Stanford. And that's when the game was changing. The game was changing. That's when the new ideas about DNA and all that stuff was showing up. And now epigenetics is in the forefront of science, except the public is still not aware. Because when they talk about epigenetics, environment causes this, you're thinking of the external environment as causing things. I go, no. The consciousness is between the external environment and the internal environment. So the external environment can be perfectly supportive. But if you feel that you're a victim of something, no matter how supportive that environment it is, the cells do not see that. The cells only see what the interpretation of the brain is, because that's the only signals that the cells get to see. They don't see the real environment. The cells see an interpretation of the environment, but that's consciousness, that's mine. And then I said, well, a long time ago, everyone thought I was a pseudoscientist, a quack, a fake, and all that. And it's like, well, time has helped me here, because now it is the mainstream of science. And to illustrate that, I just want to reveal a little bit of an excerpt from a research by Dr. Stephen Cole, who was at UCLA Medical School, a professor, and he was working on poverty and the role of genes in health. What he started to find out was poverty and health, because it always shows that poorer people have less healthy outcomes than rich people. So they were trying to say, the poverty is what the issue is. And then it goes, oh no, he failed for this reason, because there are poor people with extremely good health and rich people with extremely bad health. And all of a sudden, then it wasn't so simple that how much money a person had. So basically, it turned out the health was really related to the environment that that person was in. So I want to show these lines, because after years of people going, oh, Lipton, that's a new agey thing, let me show you what the leading edge voice of science today is saying. And so from Steve Cole, here's the quote. To an extent that immunologists and psychologists rarely appreciate, we are architects of our own experience. All of a sudden, the first thing he's saying is, regardless of what immunology and genetics and psychologists tell you, you are an architect of your own experience. Guess what? Using your blueprints that you can rewrite using epigenetics. But the next sentence to me is the most important one from Steve Cole. And that sentence simply goes, your subjective experience carries more power than your objective situation. Well, on the surface, it's like, well, that's a lot of big words. What the heck does that mean? So I want to simplify it. And here's the beautiful simplification. Subjective experience is your belief. I believe this. This is my subjective experience. I believe this. So if I put belief where it says subjective experience, and I say, what about objective situation? I go, simple word, reality. Objective experience is reality. So I replace that with the word reality. Now I read that sentence and it goes, your belief carries more power than your reality. And all of a sudden I go, absolutely. This is what we've been getting to. Your belief overrides your genes, and your genes and behavior are expressing your reality. So your belief is culturing and shaping that experience. And I go back to the mind again. So let me show this quote from Max Planck. Max Planck is one of the founders of quantum physics. And I just love this because this is what quantum physicists knew in 1925. And even though they've known in 1925, it's only coming into reality of the public today. But I say, what did it say? Well, the quote from Planck is, all matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter. And that was from 1925, beginning of quantum physics. First thing it said is, mind is creating this. And then just to add to this, Sir James Jeans, another prize-winning physicist from the day, what does he write? Well, he writes, the stream of knowledge is heading towards a non-mechanical reality. The universe begins to look more like a great thought than like a great machine. He goes on and says, mind no longer appears to be an accidental intruder into the realm of matter. We ought rather hail it as the creator and the governor of the realm of matter. So what is this physicist from 1925, when people started to realize the meaning of it, saying? Mind is the creator of the realm of matter. And that's where all of a sudden we go back to the title of what's this presentation. Look in the mirror, see the creator. Why? Your mind is creating the experiencing that you are having on this planet right now. And to further add to that, there's a smaller quote from Arthur Eddington, another physicist from that day. And what did Eddington write? He writes, it is difficult for the matter-of-fact physicist to accept the view that the substratum of everything is of mental character. And all of a sudden I go, wow, this is exactly what we've been talking about. And that physics is the most valid science on the planet. And the premise starts off from day one. Mind is creating. And I say, well, it's very simple. Then what happens if you change your mind? And the obvious answer is then you change your reality. So all of a sudden, we come to mind being the creator, and this is where a lot of people stop, because they'll look at their life with whether there's cancer in it, unhappiness, or whatever is not really right. And then you say, mind is the creator, and the first thing is, I wouldn't have created that. I had no vision of getting cancer. I have no desire to be sick. My mind doesn't encourage that. And I go, very quick review then. Let's understand what the mind is all about. The word the mind thinks like there's one mind, but the truth is there are two minds. And each mind has a different function, and each mind learns in a different way. And this is where the problems in our world comes from today. And I say, what is the mind? I say, well, the first evolution of the mind is called the conscious mind, which is right behind your forehead. This is the latest evolution, a lobe of tissue right back here. And this is a conscious mind. And I say the conscious mind, and it's really important, represents our identity, our source, and our spirit. And this is different than the other mind called the subconscious mind, which is about 90% of the brain. The subconscious mind has no one in it. This is why we have problems talking to ourselves to fix the program in the subconscious mind, because it turns out nobody's in the subconscious mind, so you can talk to your blue in the face, and I go, that's not changing the program, because it's the subconscious is a program mind, okay? It's a mind that is based on record and playback. So let's go back to the conscious mind for a second. The conscious mind's character is creativity. This is why, as you go up the evolutionary scale, as you start getting toward humans, you start to see how our creative character manifests our life. Hey, good idea. Let's go to the moon. How do you do that? I say, well, first of all, you got to be very creative. And then we create rocket ships, and then we go to the moon. I say, well, we did that first with imagination, creativity, and then followed it up with making something. So the conscious mind is creative. And I say, why is it relevant? And this is clearly the most important point. Your conscious mind, which is connected to your source, and we have time, we'll talk spirituality here because it's source, but the conscious mind being creative, I say, what does it represent? I say, it represents your wishes, your desires, and your aspirations. So if I say, Chrissy, tell me what you want out of your life. Well, that's creative by its nature. You're going to tell me about a future. It doesn't exist. So you're going to be creative. And you say, oh, I want to be healthy. I want to be happy. I want to have a great job. I go, yeah, that's great. That's conscious wishing, conscious desires. And even the concept of positive thinking is a conscious desire. And let me just emphasize why this is important, because for years, medicine has left the mind out of the body, because we were dealing with what was called Newtonian physics that said physical matter and energy are two different realms and they don't interact. Body being physical can only be influenced by physical things. So that's how we ended up with drugs and all the other things, is because you want to change the body, then you change something physical. But when quantum physics came in and said there's not a duality, everything is a unity, everything is energy. And so at some point, medicine is being forced to take into consideration mind is all powerful, more than drugs, which is the interest of the pharmaceutical industry. And this is one of the reasons why we have so much trouble here, is because the money of that vast industry does not want you to understand that you can control your life with your mind, because then who's going to buy the drugs? Aha, that's the problem right there. So I go, okay, positive thinking. Medicine knew about it for a long time, but does not really want to go deep into it, and that is called the placebo effect. The placebo effect is, oh, you have an illness, the doctor comes up and says, here, look, I've got the greatest new drug just off the research desk. It's going to really, cure you and all that. You take this new drug, you get well, and then you find out it was a sugar pill. And I go, well, what healed you? Well, obviously it wasn't a sugar pill. It was the belief in the sugar pill. And this is called the placebo effect, healing as a result of belief. Even though the intervention, whether it's a fake surgery or a fake drug or anything, it had no contribution. It was only the belief in it that created the healing. So yeah, mind plays an important role, but medicine, influenced by the monetary concerns of the pharmaceutical industry, are not interested in you having a placebo effect because there's no money in it. And we're being dissuaded from mind continuously. But regardless, now the population is beginning to see that mind is really playing a very important role, okay? I say, okay, so creative conscious mind driven by your spiritual wishes and desires should take us to success. And I said, yeah, but we also have a subconscious mind. I say the subconscious mind's characters record playback. It's like a CD recorder. You put a program on that CD, and every time you push play, the thing will always play over and over and over again. So the character of the subconscious mind is habit, habituation, habits, programs. And I go, well, why is this interesting? Because I say, well, number one, what we'll talk about in a second is the fundamental programs in your subconscious don't come from you. They were downloaded during your first 7 years of life by observing other people. So their behaviors are the fundamental programs in your subconscious, not your behaviors, not your wishes or desires. You downloaded them from other people. And so the subconscious mind's a record playback. First 7 years, it observes the world, downloads everything like a video recorder into the subconscious mind. And that's how a child can get off the ground, because a child needs to be a member of a family and a community. And guess what? There are rules. I say, how many rules? I go, thousands of rules. I say, how are you going to teach an infant thousands of rules? I go, you don't have to, because if the brain is in the first 7 years is in a record mode, vibration on EEG called theta, then the child just has to observe and it downloads everything. So it's like downloading programs to get off the ground. I mean, it's very simple. If I bought a brand new computer and it had an operating system, I could turn it on. But I say, yeah, but I want to make a drawing. I say, oh, do you have an art program? Oh, you want to write something? You have a write program? All of a sudden you realize I have a computer, but without programs, I can't use it. So a child's brain is like a computer. It wakes up, system is on. I say, so what should you do? And the idea is when it's first opened up, that computer in the child's brain, no programs. I say, well, how do you get the program? I say, download. I say, how do you do that? Brain functions in theta, which is download. Okay. So we create habits before consciousness even involves the brain. Consciousness starts at around age 7 as a predominant activity. First 7 years is feeding the basic programs to operate from into the system. Those are habits. They come from our instincts and our experiences of life. You learned how to walk. Guess what? You still got the program in there. You got it before you were 2. And like me, I'm over, I'm 75. I said, guess what? I didn't have to learn how to walk again. I got that program back there when I was 2. I say, thank God I have a subconscious mind because it's got some good programs in there. And I say, but then some of the things we download are not very good programs, and they've been in there in your mind ever since they were put in there before age 7. And where many of them come from, not personal experiences like learning how to walk. That's you learning how to handle your body. But we can download behaviors by listening to our parents and our family. One of the big ones that always affects me is the concept of bigotry. I go, what does that mean? I say, what does a child know about bigotry? Nothing. Until what? Until the parents tell, we don't like those people. We don't like them. The kid hasn't even met those people, has no idea who those people are. But guess what? It's got a program. If any of those people ever show up, I already have the character for them because I downloaded the behavior. And so the point about it is this. A child learns bigotry. From where? Not from its own experience, but downloading the behavior of its family and its community. I go, so the fundamental beliefs, and this is the critical part, that are in the subconscious mind didn't come from us, don't answer wishes and desires. They're programs, and we got them primarily from other people. And if they had bad behaviors, we downloaded the program of bad behavior as well. Going into that family with cancer, it's a behavior that caused the cancer. It was an environmental problem that was not creating harmony. That's where the cancer came from. I say, so what? Well, the infant in that family doesn't get the gene, but it learns the behavior by observing the parent. So the behavior is passed generation to generation to generation. If a family learned you are not powerful, you're poor, and you have no ability to get out of here. And that belief, that can be passed on. It's a belief. It passes on just like genes, okay? So now I say, well, how did the programming occur? So this very quickly, we go back and I say, you can put wires on a person's head and read their brain activity. It's called electroencephalograph. It's also abbreviated EEG. I say, when you look at an adult, we have high and low vibrations during the day, lots of vibrations, brain activity. But if you look at a child, the child's brain vibration, which is character of the brain, jumps at different levels from the lowest one, delta, when the first year and a half of a child's life. Delta is like sleep or unconscious because a child spends most of its time sleeping in that first year and a half. But by 2, the vibration of the brain ramps up a bit, and that's called theta. It's a higher vibration. And children, the character of it is imagination. That's how children can have a tea party, pour nothing into the cup, drink nothing, and then describe how wonderful the tea was, or ride a broom and it's a horse. It's not a broom anymore. So theta is the character of mixing imaginary and real world, okay? By age 7, the vibration ramps up to a higher vibe called alpha, which is calm consciousness. That's when consciousness, self-reflection starts to come into the system. Before age 7, the child is observing the world, but not really seeing themselves as an element in that world as much, okay? That's self-reflection. By 12, the vibration ramps up again to the next higher vibration, which is called beta, which is schoolroom focused consciousness, or the consciousness in observing what we're talking about here. I say, what's important? Well, if you look at the chart, the most important thing I can tell you is this. For the first 7 years, the child is not in consciousness. It's lower vibration. It's theta. Theta is hypnosis. I say, what's it for? And I say, well, number 1, enculturation. I said, yeah, how'd you learn thousands of rules to fit into that world? And the answer was, you observed everybody living by the rules and copied them, and now they're programs. Okay? So that's enculturation. The biggest sabotage of ourselves come from the same period also gives us self-identity. I go, what does that mean? I said, well, who am I? As a kid, who am I? The answer is given by parents because they criticize the child and trying to get them to do better. They usually criticize, come on, you can do better now. You're not that smart. You don't deserve this. They don't mean that for the rest of their life. They're just trying to needle the kid to do better. And I go, well, here's the problem. If the kid is under 7, they don't have the consciousness to interpret what the parents are saying, but they are recording the words. So I say, so what kind of words did the child get before age 7? Not good enough, not smart enough, not beautiful enough, not capable of this, not deserving of that. I go, Jesus, 70% of the programming is disempowering and negative. Okay, so this is where our problems come from. Our subconscious has got all this negative stuff. You go, yeah, but I don't want to use subconscious. I'm going to use my creative mind, conscious mind, wishes, desires. Oh, that's how I'm going to create my life. And I go, in the next slide, this is where the problem comes from. The Secret Mind is an article that reveals that only 5% of our life is coming from creativity, wishes, desires, aspirations. Because when we think, consciousness is directed inside and stops controlling the behavior on the outside. So the body is like a vehicle, and consciousness got its hands on the wheels, driving it toward where? Wishes, desires, aspirations. I'm driving conscious mind. But I say, but the moment you start thinking, thinking is an inside job. So the moment you start thinking, guess what? The conscious mind lets go of driving, goes inside, because thinking is inside. And I say, why is that relevant? I say, well, if the conscious mind is not driving the vehicle, then who is driving the vehicle? I go, subconscious is autopilot. And as the article reveals, according to cognitive neuroscientists, we are conscious of only about 5% of our cognitive activity. Simple point, only 5% of our behavior is controlled by wishes and desires. And the reason is 95% of our behavior is controlled by the subconscious as a default, meaning what? Conscious mind's thinking, so subconscious takes over. And I go, well, what's the consequence of that? And I go, well, the 95% of our behavior is not coming from wishes and desires. It's coming from the program that I got through my family. And if they have negative aspects, I'm expressing negative aspects at the same time. And so it really becomes important when we understand that 95% of behavior is not coming from wishes and desires, coming from program. I say, why is it relevant? So in the next slide, we go back and I say, yes, conscious mind's creative, wishes and desires, subconscious is habits, 70% of which we downloaded before age 7 are negative and disempowering. And I say, so what's the difference? I say, well, 5% of your life is coming from the creative mind, 95% from the program mind. And so wishes and desires are not really manifest. And what we're manifesting is unconscious behavior that is not positive, 70% or more taking us off the track, creating that cancer, creating those problems in behavior and relationships and job and every other darn thing we're trying to do. And all of a sudden I say, then the significance is this. The behavior that we express 95% of the time is acquired from other people, family and community. And that in a sense, then we have all been programmed. And that is the conclusion of this. And I say, so what's the point? I say, we want to have the wonderful life, and our life never really matches our wishes and desires. And I go, that's because the program that we got, 70% is disempowering you, and you don't see it. So just to give an illustration of that and close out on this very quickly is this. Presumably, many of you had a friend in your growing up, and you knew your friend's behavior very well, and you happen to know your friend's parent. And one day you see your friend has the same behavior as their parent. Of course, this excites you. You want to tell your friend, you go, hey, Bill, you're just like your dad. And then you back away from Bill, because Bill will be the first one to go ballistic and say, how can you compare me to my dad? I'm nothing like my dad. And most people laugh because they've had that experience. And I go, well, there's two profound points, same story, profound point. Everybody else can see that Bill behaves like his dad. The only one who doesn't see it is Bill. Explanation is simple. 95% of his life is coming from the program he downloaded from his father. And the reason he's playing the program, because his conscious mind's not paying attention. So as the behavior is coming out, Bill doesn't see it because it's automatic. And his consciousness is in thought 95% of the time. And all of a sudden that explains why Bill, is creating sabotaging behavior that he got from his dad, but he himself didn't see it. And then I said, that's profound point one. Now I said profound point number two, and this really hits home, Brady. We are all Bill. Every one of us is doing this 95% of the day, and it's invisible. And I say, well, what's the consequence of it being invisible? I said, You see the result of the behavior, but you never saw the behavior. You see the result, ill health, bad relationships, lousy job. And I go, wow. And I say, and what in that person's mind do they consider is going on? Well, the first thing they consider is this. I wanted to be healthy, happy, and have a great job. So my conscious mind sure as heck didn't create that. And so the world is not supporting me. I'm a victim. Whether it's genes for cancer or bad job, I'm a victim. And I go, oh my God, that is where the problem comes from. And the problem is simply this. We are creating this 95% unconsciously from programs that are primarily negative and disempowering. And so all of a sudden I say, oh my God, stop being a victim, because if you own, I am a victim, the universe is not helping me, well, that's a belief. And guess what? The system is designed to make that belief real. And so, that's the Buddha quote again, what we imagine, we become. In this case, I go, yeah. So we have to start saying, well, if my life isn't working right, stop blaming the outside, because it will get you nowhere, because it really came from invisible behavior on the inside. And you say, okay, Bruce, I got programmed. How do I know what the programs are? So I just want to help people very quickly at this last moment. And that is this. 95% of your life is coming from the program. Your life is a printout of your subconscious program. Point is very simple. Look at your life and recognize this. Anything you wish and like and comes into your life because you like it and it shows up, it's there because you have a program to acknowledge that. But the one that I need to emphasize is the fact is this. When you look at your life and you start to see that you want certain things, but to get there, you struggle, you work hard, you put a lot of effort into it, you sweat over it, you're making so much work to get there. I go, why are you working so hard? And the answer inevitably is that destination is not in your program. And you're trying to override a program that will limit you. And I say, yeah, try and do that. Let's do the math. Number one, the subconscious mind is 1,000,000 times more powerful a computer than the conscious mind. Number two, the subconscious mind is running the show 95% of the time. And all of a sudden you start to see, my life is happening to me. I didn't consciously understand it, but boy, it's sure hitting me in the face. And I go, because that's what you were sending out. It's the law of attraction. You send out something negative, only something negative is going to come back. That's where our problems come from. So in conclusion, mind-body is a reality. It used to be thought of as a new age idea. And I go, no, that's way beyond that now, folks. Mind, body, first example, placebo, which is the positive thinking leads to healing, regardless of the pill being a sugar pill. And we have to recognize that the placebo effect is just mind over body. And I said, that is the primary example. And while I'm saying that, let me just add this, because this is the other side of the coin of placebo that people don't talk about. But to me, it's like, well, this is the part you should know about. Positive thinking can heal you. The other side of the coin. What about negative thinking? And this is the most important point. Negative thinking is equally powerful in creating your life, but in the opposite direction of your wishes. And then I say, wow, then 95% of our life coming from those programs, no wonder we struggle. And yet we're creators. And finally, Lipton's going to get to the end and acknowledge very simply this. What happens if you stop playing the program? And the answer is, this is exactly what happens when we fall in love. Science has recognized the first time you stay mindful and stop reverting into program. And I say, just in 24 hours after meeting somebody, your life could be blah, blah, blah. Every day you meet somebody, 24 hours later, you're in deep love and you have heaven on earth. I go, heaven on earth was always available to you. It's only when you go back to the subconscious programming that'll sabotage honeymoon and heaven on earth. And basically what it says was this: if I stop playing the program, the result, Well, that's what's called the honeymoon. Life is heaven on earth, and that's the message. If we recognize the power of the program, if you're not living heaven on earth, there's a program in the way. I hope I didn't talk too much on that, Christy.
Oh my gosh, that was brilliant. I was just taking notes the whole time, and interestingly enough, once I had a question, moments later you would address it, and I'm like, oh, there goes that. But we have time for one quick question, and I want to ask you, since 95% of our lives are run on these subconscious programs, how would you suggest that we begin to actively deprogram? I mean, you did say, noticing where we're struggling, but is there a certain kind of meditation or subliminal process that you would point us to?
100%. Thank you for that question, because that's the resolution part of the whole story that we're talking about. And basically says this: as I mentioned, the subconscious mind has nobody in it. So the idea of talking to yourself by, I'm going to give myself a good talking to, I go, well, fine, go talk to a CD player there's a program playing. And I say, talk to the CD player and ask it to change the program. And the answer is, I don't care how much you talk till you're blue in the face. That program is not going to change, because that's not how the program changes. You need to push a record button. So I say, well, then here are the record buttons. There are two natural ones, because this is the way we recorded these programs in the first place. One is self-hypnosis, meaning hypnosis is what? You shut down the vibration of the conscious mind, so the conscious mind's not even working, but the subconscious mind is open for record. So when you get down to that theta vibration, whatever you're hearing will go straight into subconscious, because conscious is disconnected. So this is where people use what are called subliminal programs. Used to be subliminal tapes. And I say, what does it mean? I say very simply this: every night when we go home from work, at work, high vibration beta. We go home, we relax, the vibration gets lower. It's called alpha. And just as we're falling off to sleep, alpha drops into theta, the next lower vibration, but consciousness is now connected because it required the higher vibe. Now it's shut off, but guess what? The next period of time after the conscious mind shuts off, alpha, the brain is in theta. So you're sleeping, but the brain is still downloading information. So if you put earphones on, that's called self-hypnosis. You play a program of what you want. And basically, the moment you're falling asleep, that program is going into subconscious, and you repeat this, and you can install a program. There's all kinds of programs available. Even Beautiful Sounds True has all this. And I say, and how do you learn after age 7? I say repetition. That's how you learn anything. You want to ride a bike, you got to get on the bike and you got to try and ride the bike. Just having the idea, I want to ride a bike, doesn't work unless you practice. Driving a car requires practice, okay? Playing a musical instrument, nice idea, but unless you practice, what are you doing in practice? Repetition, habituation. As you repeat it over and over again, there's a point where now it's learned, you don't have to think about it anymore. And then all of a sudden you become very proficient, because you're not spending your time learning. You already learned. You learned how to drive a car. You don't need to think about it like the day you first got in a car and everything overwhelmed you. Now it's automatic. You put the key in the car, talk to the passenger, drive to someplace without even paying attention. Okay, so that's habituation. The new age phrase that I laugh over, because it's true but funny, is fake it till you make it. Meaning, if you want to be happy and you're not, I say within every day, as many times as you can, every day you say, I am happy, I am happy. Why? Because after age 7, repetition, habituation puts a program in. If you repeat I am happy many, 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 many times, the subconscious finally gets it. And then guess what? What's the function of the mind? To create coherence between the program and the reality. Now I install the program, I am happy. Guess what? I don't even have to work on being happy. You don't have to work on anything in the subconscious. It's been working for you 95% of the day without you even making an effort. But if you put the right program in, you will manifest that program without any effort. So the only effort is to put it in. And then the last one, necessity is the mother of invention. Civilization is on a very very scary precipice right now. We're facing extinction called the sixth mass extinction of life. It's due to human behavior. If we want to survive on this planet, then we really radically have to change human behavior. There's a need for it. And guess what? Now there's a new way of writing these new beliefs. It's called energy psychology. There are many modalities of it. It engages what is called a super learning process in the brain. And the relevance about that is the learning could actually take place in minutes rather than the repetition time needed for self-hypnosis or habituation. And on my website, very simple, brucelipton.com. Under resources, I got about 25 different energy psychology modalities that can help us rewrite beliefs in minutes. Boy, is this necessary for right now. And it is fabulous. It is totally fabulous because it's employing the knowledge of who we are, the knowledge of how it works, and the mechanism. And knowledge is power. And with this knowledge, we have the power to rewrite our lives. People with cancer experience what is called a spontaneous remission. Instantly, the cancer disappears. Say, how did that happen? In every case, it was a change in consciousness. And the result was virtually instantaneous. Just as much as I said, your life could be blah, blah, blah every day. You meet somebody and 24 hours later, you're talking about how beautiful the world is. I go, this is how fast you can change these things. And this is so important. And basically, what do you want to change? Just take a look at the world and tell me what you want that you're struggling to get. And that already is the program that you want to start manifesting the positive side of that program. So you can use that to start to engage a reprogramming of limitation.
Bruce, thank you. Wow. Wonderful.
I so appreciate this opportunity. We have time for a short question, or should we just, did I talk so much? I'm sorry.
Well, we're at time right now, but if there is one nugget that you would like to share, if there's one takeaway from this that you would really like us all to get, share that with us, please.
Maybe the title comes back right here, that we look at the world with the belief that things happen to us, but the new biology, which corresponds with the physics, is no, we are creating that life. So when you own you are the creator, then you own the power to make a change. But if you believe you're a victim, you have no power because you've given that up. That's what it means being a victim. And so the bottom line is this. We are all creating. If you do not like the creations, it's time for us to not blame the world anymore, but it's time for us to look at it and say, well, what am I unconsciously doing to precipitate the problems that I'm experiencing? Because if I understand that, then I have the power to rewrite those programs. And when I rewrite those programs, heaven on earth is not just a short honeymoon experience. It's an everyday experience of life on this planet. And boy, I've been enjoying it for 30 or so years of this heaven on earth stuff, and it's well worth it.
And we've been enjoying your presentation. Thank you yet again, Dr. Bruce Lipton.
Thank you, Chris, and all the wonderful people out there. I hope you see this because we all start working together. Earth is heaven.
Oh, that's a perfect note to end on. We want to give our thanks once again to Dr. Bruce Lipton, and we want to thank all of those who were able to join us today for this session. We really appreciate you being with us. Please note, the recording of this session will remain accessible for free for 24 hours. And if you wish, you can purchase the entire summit with lifetime access to each recording, transcripts from each session, and bonus gifts from our presenters. For Sounds True, I'm Christy Peoples with Bruce Lipton. SoundsTrue.com, waking up the world.